Hey guys, welcome back to Sitting with Shar. If you're new here, hi, welcome in. My name is Shani, aka Sharmanda29, and this is my podcast. This is my crazy little space where I talk about things that are on my mind or I don't really want to talk about on stream or in a video. This is kind of that in between space where I get to sit down with you and we get to talk about just topics that I'm interested in talking about. Occasionally we bring in some guests and we do some shit talking and it's great fun. But today's a solo episode, and today's episode is actually about something that is very close to home for me and something that I don't really talk about very often, and that is my diabetes. I am a type 1 diabetic, if you did not know, and this podcast episode is actually very special and very important to me because this month is November, which is National Diabetes Awareness Month. And this year it's also my 14-year anniversary of having type 1 diabetes. This story never gets easier to tell. Before I started streaming and making content, this month was honestly one of the hardest months of the year for me. It was a time of grief in my life where I would grieve the life that I felt that I was robbed of because of this condition. I would grieve the childhood that I felt like I'd missed out on. And don't get me wrong, like I'm really lucky to still be here, to still be alive, and to be able to do what I do today. I know that there are so many more people who are much worse off than me, but whenever this month rolls around, it's always a time where I kind of find myself reflecting on what could have been and what my life has been like since I got this condition. And over the last 3 years of making content, I have done a charity stream each year to try and raise money and awareness around type 1 diabetes and what it is, because every day, like even now, I still live with this stigma and this completely wrong idea of like what diabetes actually is. I get so many people who assume so many things about me and my life just because I have this condition. And I like to use this month to kind of raise awareness and educate people as to what it actually is and why it's so important to understand it, because there are so many people who live with this condition. It is a lot more common than you would think, and it mostly happens in kids. So today I want to get into the story about what happened all those years ago. I'm making myself sound so old, but what happened 14 years ago and how I ended up in the position that I am today, and I guess just kind of talking about my experiences and my thoughts around all of it. Before we get into the episode, guys, if you enjoy this episode or you enjoy hanging out with me, make sure you check out my other content. Make sure you subscribe to the pod. Make sure that you click all the buttons, the like, the follow, ratings. On Spotify, I know there's actually a poll where you can respond to like how you felt about this episode. Make sure you fill that out. I love seeing your comments and your just the ratings and everything. It really does help and mean the world to me. So if you've done any of that, I really appreciate it and thank you so much. All right, let's get into the episode. I have stalled long enough. Let's get into it. Where do I even start? I guess way back when. When I was 10 years old, I was in year 4 at school, which seems like so long ago now. It almost seems like a fever dream. It doesn't even seem real. I was in year 4 and we went on kind of this day trip at school, and we went to this small town which had a lolly shop, a honey factory, a bakery, and lots of other like really cool things to see and do. And as a 10-year-old, like it was such a fun day out, or it was meant to be. I just remember the whole day something being off. I felt really sick. I felt very headachy and just off. You know when you're sick and you don't feel right, but you can't understand why. That's how I felt. And when we went to the honey store and we were trying honeys, I got some honey like on like a paddle pop stick or something, and I tried it, and I felt so sick. Like I couldn't stomach the idea of eating any honey. Like I felt so nauseous, and I honestly, after that I didn't stop being nauseous. I remember getting off the bus and going to my mom and telling her that I just didn't feel good. And the weeks following that trip, things got worse. I had migraines and headaches all the time. I was drinking a lot of water. I lost so much weight. I actually got pulled out of school for a few weeks because I just couldn't concentrate. And I was just laying on a mattress in our lounge room watching TV, sleeping. And the only reasons that I would get out of bed, well, that makeshift bed, was to get water and to go to the bathroom. And that was it. And I was very in and out. Like I was very young. I was very sick. I didn't think much of it. And my mom, she just saw me drinking liters and liters and liters of water and just being so sick and just not knowing what was wrong. We went to the doctor and we had two possible diagnoses. We were worried that it could be a blood clot in my brain, because I was having so many migraines and headaches and I was so dizzy and just not well. And the other diagnosis was diabetes. Now, looking back on this, like these are very two very different diagnoses. I have no clue how we went to such different extremes. But I think I ended up with the better option. So, I can't really complain. We went and got, I believe it was a CT scan done on my head, on my brain, and they confirmed I did have a brain. So you can go tell my boyfriend that I do have a brain. They confirmed that I do have a brain and that there was no blood clot, which was, fabulous news. We love to hear it. 3 days after that, I went and got blood tests done. And this was my first ever blood test at 10 years old. Fun fact, I have terrible veins. Like, I work in pathology. I work with blood collectors. I am a blood collector. I only know two people who I work with who can actually collect blood from me. My veins are that bad. And when you're a kid, they're even smaller. So I didn't have a good start with this whole blood test experience thing. I did not have a good start. I was terrified of needles. I had a massive needle phobia. Foreshadowing. But I had this huge needle phobia, and for my first blood test, I had six doctors slash staff members just holding me down. And I'm pretty sure I'm remembering this wrong, but all I remember is like they were all wearing like white lab coats, which I don't think is accurate. But in my brain, there were six big doctors in lab coats holding me down while I got this needle jammed into my arm. Long story short, it was traumatic. They got the bloods done, which was great. And my grandpa, who took me to go get my bloods done, he took me out to lunch afterwards. And it was, it was great. I still remember exactly what I got. We went to an Italian restaurant and I got a lasagna and a Fanta. I can never figure, I don't know why I remember those details so specifically, but this entire day there are so many details that I remember. Like even the date, I remember it was Wednesday the 18th of November 2009. Like I don't know why I remember the day. I guess like it was such a huge moment in my life that so many of these things are like burned into my brain. Anyway, we had lunch. I had a lasagna and I just felt sick. I was so tired. I was very drained after the blood test, and I went and we went home, and I remember just collapsing on the couch. Like I just remember just having no energy and just being like, thank God I can just rest. And at the time, I was at my grandpa's house. My mum and dad were working 2 hours each way in different directions. They had a couple of businesses in trees, and so they were out doing different work for different clients. One, 2 hours one way, one, 2 hours the other way. And I was smack bang in the middle with my grandpa. So I flopped down onto this couch. I am absolutely exhausted. I have no energy. I am very sick. And I just think I'm tired. Like, but at this point, like I had been this tired for weeks. Like this was becoming almost normal for me. I didn't really think too much on it. My grandpa gets a call and he goes and answers the phone in the kitchen. And I just remember sort of like vaguely hearing him on the phone, and I couldn't, like I just remember my brain being so foggy. And he came back into where I was and he said, we're gonna have to go again. And I said, are we going to the hospital? And I don't know why I thought I was going to the hospital, but he said, yeah, we're gonna have to go to the hospital. The phone call was from my mum, who, as I said, was 2 hours away. She had gotten a call from the lab who was testing my bloods, and basically they were testing the amount of sugar that was in my blood. And a good level for that is 6.0. My blood sugar levels at that time were 38.9, and I had acid in my blood as well. So I had 2.0 acid. Oh, wait, was it 2.0? No, 2.9. 2.9 acid in my blood, and I had those really high blood sugars. And you're not meant to have any acid in your blood, zero point 0.0. So I had 2.9, and my blood sugars were 38.9. Both of those, very bad. Very, very, very bad. We rushed to the hospital, and I can only assume, looking back on this now, that they must have had like some massive trauma or something come in to the ER. We sat in that waiting room for 2 hours before we were managed to be seen by someone. And I've had plenty of experiences now as a diabetic where as soon as you have any ketones in your blood, any acid in your blood, if you've got high blood sugars, you are like rushed through because it can be really dangerous. It can be risking organ damage. It can be risking many different things. Honestly, diabetes is super fun in that it affects your entire body and can possibly damage a lot of things in your body. So I waited for 2 hours before I was able to be seen in this time. And during that time, my dad managed to get back first. He managed to come and see us right before I got called into the doctors, and walked in, and I I remember that they weighed me, and I remember that they did a needle in my finger, and that was my first finger prick. And honestly, at that point, like I was so far gone that I didn't even care. Like I was like, just do what you have to do. Like I didn't care anymore. When I say that I was sick, I was so sick. I was really thin. I was really pale. I had no energy. I was really lethargic, and I can't even imagine how scary that would have been for my parents. They weigh me, they do the needle in my finger, they check my blood sugars, it's high, so they chuck me back into the ED, into a bed. And I'm kind of sitting there, and they have to go get more bloods. They take another 6 tubes of blood from me, and you can imagine how well that went after that blood test that morning. That's right, I had 2 blood tests in the same day, and that was my first ever blood test experience. Not a fun time. They took my bloods. I was sitting in this bed. My mum managed to get there, and honestly, it felt like hours and hours had passed, but I'm pretty sure it wasn't that long. But as I said, I was very far gone. And this team of doctors came in, and I remember just sort of looking at everyone. They kind of all surrounded my bed. And I remember them asking me, do you know what diabetes is? And my cousin was actually diabetic at the time, and all I knew, and I told them this, is that she has special food that her brother gets in trouble for eating. Once again, foreshadowing for me and my brother, my God. And yeah, they pretty much told me, that I had diabetes, and that was the start of it. After they left, the hospital brought in some food for me, and they said I couldn't have the food until I had another needle. And this needle was going in my stomach. This was my first insulin injection, and I was terrified. I kicked and I screamed, and I was terrified, and I actually ended up breaking the needle on the outside of my body, which I was very lucky about, but I actually broke the needle, and the nurse said, if you break this inside you, you're going to have to get a bigger needle and surgery to get it out of you, and like all this stuff. Terrifying. So I laid still and cried, and they gave me my first needle, and I was allowed to have the food. But I remember before they did that needle, I said, you can only do this. I will only let you do this if you promise that it will be my last needle ever. I tried to bargain with them. And look where that got me. But I got through it. I got my first needle. I didn't break that one. And I got to have my dinner. And they found me a bed in the kids' ward. I still remember, I believe I was in room 9. And I was there for a week. And it was almost like this really messed up Christmas. That's one weird thing about diabetes. Or I can imagine a lot of conditions would be like this. But with diabetes, especially with diabetes, my God, you get all of these presents, but they're all about like needles and equipment to like manage things, and you get like a book to record all your blood sugars in, and like all this stuff. It's wild. You get all of these presents. I guess I should also kind of define diabetes for anyone who doesn't know what it is. I honestly, I'm so sorry, I completely forgot to do that. So type 1 diabetes is an autoimmune condition. It's pretty much where your immune system attacks a gland in your body called your pancreas. And you need your pancreas to produce this thing called insulin. I'm trying to explain this in very basic terms. If I don't make sense, feel free to have a Google, do your own research. But diabetes is pretty much where your immune system attacks your pancreas and stops you from making insulin. And you need insulin to be able to digest your food and get energy from your food. Without insulin and without that energy from your food, you become really tired. You become really lethargic. You lose weight, and your body actually starts to eat away at your fat cells, your muscle, your tissue. and breaking that down to get energy. So that is why I lost a lot of weight. That's why I was drinking so much water, because I was trying to get rid of all of the sugar and all of the glucose that was in my blood. It was really bad. I went for over a month without getting energy from food. And that is why I was so sick. So they put me in to a hospital room for a week. And as I said, it was kind of like a fucked up Christmas. I got lots of stuff. I got like a little bag to like hold all my diabetes stuff in. I got this little teddy bear that I could do my needles with, that I could practice doing needles on with him, and we could do our needles together. I thought it was really cool at the time. I thought it was really cool because I was getting all this stuff, and I had family members coming to visit me all the time and giving me like, buying me stuff, like presents, and like bringing me stuff, and I thought it was really cool. The not so cool part was I started doing injections 6 times a day minimum in my stomach, and 5 to 10 in my fingers a day, with the finger pricks. So pretty much I had to do 6 insulin injections a day whenever I would eat, and 1 in the morning when I woke up, and 1 before bed. And then I would have to do needles in my fingers 5 to 10 times a day, and put a drop of blood into a machine that would tell me what my blood sugars were. And diabetes is pretty much this massive balancing act. You have to keep your blood sugars around a certain level, not too high, not too low, because both can be really dangerous. And that was the start of it all. While I was in hospital, I learned how to give myself needles. I learned how to measure up my own medication. I learned how to count carbohydrates in my food and calculate insulin based off of those carbs. Keep in mind, I'm 10 at this point. I learned that I had to carry around jelly beans everywhere I went, but I couldn't eat them unless I went too low with my blood sugars. When I would get really sick and shaky and dizzy and I could barely walk, that was when I was allowed to have those. And when I went back to school, after a week in hospital and I believe a week or 2 at home learning how to take care of myself without the nurse's help, and without, my mum around me with like getting ready to be alone at school and do this all myself. When I got back to school, I had, from my fucked up Christmas, I had this little DVD, and it was called Professor Bumblebee's like Guide to Type 1 Diabetes or something. It was really cute. It was a little like stop animation thing, and it basically explained diabetes to people. And I played that for my class, to try and explain to them what had happened. And at the start I don't know, I guess I was really proud because I had all this new stuff, and it was like I was different, and it was exciting and new and interesting, and I swore I would be like the best diabetic ever. I swore my blood sugars would be amazing and I was going to be on top of everything. And for a long time I was. And I guess after a bit, that difference kind of became not so cool. It wasn't this fun, different little thing anymore. It was my life. I realized that I was different from other people. I realized I couldn't eat without causing myself pain, without injecting myself. I realized that I couldn't survive on my own without this tiny amount of medication keeping me alive. I realized that I could die in a week if I didn't have the equipment that I needed to stay alive. And when you're growing up and when you're going through puberty and teenage years and hormones and everything in between, the chemistry in your brain is insane. There is so much happening. And throwing diabetes into the mix is a very vicious cycle. It is very difficult, and I would not wish it on anyone. As I went on with my diabetes, and as I went from being this perfect little diabetic with everything all lined up in a row and everything amazing, as I started to like go into my teenage years, and as my brain chemistry kind of went and changed, and I became really, really depressed. I stopped taking care of myself for a long time. I was meant to do 6 injections a day. I was lucky to do 1. I was meant to do 5 to 10 finger pricks a day. I was lucky to do 1. And I know it sounds ridiculous. It's like, you know what you have to do. It's like, why wouldn't you do it? Because I was so tired of living with it. I wanted it to stop. And I wanted to be like all of my friends who did not have this condition, who could eat whatever they wanted without stress, who could eat sugar without getting sick or feeling sick for hours afterwards. The other twisted side of this actually goes back to, I believe, something I've spoken on a different podcast episode about, and that was about talking about women's bodies. When you don't take care of your diabetes, when you don't control your blood sugars and do your injections and do everything, your body eats away at your fat cells for energy, which means you lose weight. I originally stopped taking care of my diabetes because of my depression around how my body was working and why I felt so weak and like unable to like stay alive without such basic necessities like this tiny little thing of medication. Like, it just, there was so much to it. And from that I lost weight. And that's when the compliments started coming in. I had so many people telling me how good I looked. I still remember one person telling me that they knew I would look better without my chub. And it kind of, in itself, became a vicious cycle of, oh, if I put in less effort and don't have to take care of myself and do all of this extra stuff every day that no one else around me has to do, I lose weight. I look more attractive to other people. guys would be interested in me. This was genuinely a thought that I had. This is before I met Graham. And I didn't see much of a downside. But the downside was that I was so fucking sick. I felt sick all the time. My sugars were constantly in the 20s for a solid, probably like 6 to 10 years, I'd say. It was really bad. It was so fucking bad. After I graduated high school and went into my gap year, I went through a lot of therapy. My perspective of myself and my body image, because of my diabetes, as well as a lot of other reasons, had been completely fucked up. And it is still something that I battle to this day. This accumulation of all of these different events and things that have formed this very warped perspective of myself and my body for over a decade now is still something that I deal with to this day. But in 2018, I went to therapy for an entire year, multiple times a week. I started to try to take care of my diabetes again. I started to try to do more and try to take better care of myself. And after my gap year, I started university. In 2019, I moved away from home into this tiny room in this 8-person house on campus, and I began my degree. And holy shit. If you've been here for any of the last 3 years of my streaming career, you know what you've seen. Some of what I've been through. But I don't share all of the things that I go through. I don't share a lot of it. Between 2019 to now, the end of my degree, which was a couple of weeks ago now, I went to hospital 28 times because of my diabetes. I had 2 minor surgeries, and I should have died multiple times. I was told that I was immunocompromised because of the extended period of time that I had had diabetes for. I started to get like head colds and like even my period, like really small things that could be typically treated at home with over-the-counter medication or pain relief and would just go away. But for me, all of these things would trigger my body to start producing acid in my blood, and I would end up in hospital on a drip and trying to figure out if I was going to be going home or if I was going to be in hospital for a week. It completely fucked with my studies, my work, my streaming, and with my perspective of myself and my life. It was so hard, but it also, overall, I think it built me into the person that I am today. I am so much stronger and resilient than I ever thought that I could be. I've gone through hell and back too many times to count. And I am just lucky to be here. I really am. In February last year, a new side effect of my diabetes came up and started to occur. And that was when I go low with my blood sugars. When my blood sugars drop below 4.0, I go paralyzed. And we are talking a full vegetative state of paralysis. I cannot stand. I cannot lift my hands or my arms above my hips. I cannot hold my head up. I can barely talk and move my tongue. I can't do anything. The only things that I can do in this state is mumble and cry. And I wish that I was exaggerating this, and I really wish I was, but I'm not. And that is it's something that I never expected to ever have to deal with in my life. And it's terrifying. After this started happening, I actually had to go back on to 2 machines to monitor me closely because we never knew when I was going to go paralyzed. It would happen, I'd say on average about 3 times a month. And I would get these almost numb sensations in my jaw and in my forearms. I don't know why, but those are the places. And from the moment I start to feel those two, I have 5 minutes before I lose my body. It is fucking terrifying. These machines that they put me on would monitor my blood sugars and see when they were trending down and tell me when they were trending down. And if I went into a coma or I went paralyzed, it would text my family if I wasn't responding to these alarms, and they could call an ambulance for me. So last September, I finally got a second diagnosis and answers to why I was getting sick so often. And it turns out that I have a second chronic condition. I have polycystic ovarian syndrome, or PCOS. And one of the effects of PCOS is insulin resistance. I take insulin daily to stay alive. And this previously undiagnosed condition makes that insulin not work properly. So pretty much the thing that I have been on for the last 14 years of my life was working, but it was not working properly. And since that diagnosis and getting onto the right medications and learning more about what my body needs to stay alive, I have been to hospital so much less. I am in a much better space. Every day is another day that I'm getting better and I'm improving and I'm doing a lot better than I was. I'm really happy about it. Diabetes has affected my life in so many ways. It is basically its own full-time job to stay alive. The reason I tell my story every November and I talk about this experience is because I know I'm not alone in this condition. As of 2021, 13,200 kids and young adults between 0 and 19 years old had type 1 diabetes. It's a condition with no reason why people get it. It happens randomly. There is no cure. And we have done nothing to get this condition. Nothing. Growing up with diabetes, I was faced with the harsh and horrible reality of the stigma that is around diabetes. I was fat shamed. I was criticized for whatever I ate. I was teased and mocked and shamed for something that I didn't do anything to get. I never did anything to get this condition. It just happened. And that is the story for so many kids. Type 1 diabetes happens in kids. It's not typically adults. Although adults can get it, it is primarily kids. And the reason that I talk about this every month is because I know that there are other kids out there being fat shamed, being bullied, being brought down for something that they can't get rid of and for something that they are forced to live with and struggle with every day. This condition can be so isolating and so difficult to live with because you never get a break. It is a constant battle 24/7. One thing that I think a lot of people don't understand with type 1 diabetes is how much money it costs to stay alive as a diabetic. On top of everything else, on top of your rent and your bills and the food and everything, on top of all of that, you have all of the medical equipment, the hypo food, the health insurance and ambulance cover if you're lucky enough to afford those things. There's so many things. The average cost to stay alive as a diabetic in Australia per year is $5,500 a year, just for the diabetes, not for everything else. It's an extra $5,500 on average per diabetic to stay alive. I got to the point during my degree with my diabetes where I went off of machines that were helping me stay alive because they were too expensive to run. And I went onto needles again because it was cheaper. And this is Australia with the good healthcare stuff, like this isn't, I can't even imagine being a diabetic in America. And my heart goes out to those people because I am so sorry. The reason I talk about my story and raise these things is because there is so much work to do around diabetes in terms of stigma and bullying and education, in terms of providing better health care and better accessibility to life-saving medications like insulin. This month is National Diabetes Awareness Month, but it is also my 14-year anniversary of having type 1 diabetes. To celebrate both, I'm doing a massive charity stream on the 18th of November. We will be trying to raise $500 for JDRF, which is the Juvenile Diabetes Research Foundation. And I've been working with them since I was about 13 years old. I've been fundraising for them since I was 13, and they help people to have better access to information around diabetes and to help connect diabetics to each other in a community, to not feel so isolated in having this condition. Because when you're a diabetic and you're surrounded by all of these people who don't go through what you go through, it can be very isolating. And JDRF has been an incredible resource for me to work with, to raise money with, and to help work our way towards a cure and better treatment for diabetics. It would mean a lot to me if you guys could come to this stream. I'll put the donation link for the Tiltify down below in the description of the episode, but it would mean the world to me if you could come, if you could check out that link, if you can donate. If you can't afford to donate, sharing that link, sharing this episode, it would mean a lot. Thank you guys for sitting with me today. I know today's episode was pretty heavy. It was a lot. I'm very lucky to have a space where I can talk about my condition and what I go through and use my platform for charity events and fundraising. It really does mean the world to me that I can do these things. And if you've previously supported me in charity events and fundraising, thank you so much. Thank you for allowing me to have this space to make content like this, to do this. I hope you guys can come to the stream, 18th of November, starting around midday, I think. Try and raise $500. There's some really cool incentives. Check out my socials for more information about everything, or, just shoot me a DM on like Instagram or Twitter or whatever, and I can answer your questions if need be. Thank you guys so much for listening and hanging out here. If you made it this far, thank you so much. Thank you for being here. I appreciate you guys more than you know. And I'm really excited. I'm really excited to do this charity stream. I'm really excited to raise more money for this amazing cause. So the last podcast episode that I did for my solo episode, I tried out this new line, and I think I'm going to keep it. I like it. I think it's really cute. So thank you guys for hanging out with me, and remember to stay cozy and be kind. I'll see you in the next one. Bye.